Hey, tonight we're diving into a different kind of wild, not the untamed American frontier of dusty towns and quick draws, but the suffocating, insidious wilderness of 15th century Spain, where survival wasn't about outrunning a bandit or facing down a grizzly, but about navigating an invisible minefield of suspicion, dogma, and fear. You might think your modern sensibilities, your knowledge, your quick wit would offer some protection, but trust me, there's a reason they called it the Holy Office of the Inquisition, and it was anything but holy for those caught in its grasp. If you're finding these historical dives intriguing, I'd really appreciate a quick like or even a subscribe. It helps more than you know in bringing these forgotten worlds to life. I'm always curious where you all are listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Love seeing our little global community connect through these stories. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We're going to explore why you might not survive even a single day under the shadow of the Spanish Inquisition. Congratulations! You've just woken up in Toledo, Spain, sometime in the late 1400s. The good news, you're about to experience a truly pivotal, albeit terrifying chapter of history firsthand. The bad news, your chances of survival just dropped dramatically. The first challenge hits you before you even open your eyes. Smell not the clean, crisp air of modern Europe, but something far more pungent and omnipresent, the stench of unwashed bodies, rotting refuse, animal waste, and the lingering, cloying odor of wood smoke and damp stone. You see, personal hygiene, as we know, it was a concept centuries away. Bathing was infrequent, often seen as an unnecessary luxury, or even, by some, as a potentially unhealthy practice, attracting humors or weakening the body. Most people might have had a perfunctory wash a few times a year, but daily ablutions were unheard of. Water, often fetched from communal wells or rivers, was primarily for cooking and drinking, and sanitation systems were primitive to non-existent, meaning sewage ran in gutters, attracting vermin and disease. As you drag yourself from your bed, which is likely a simple cot with a straw mattress, you realize how every muscle in your body aches. Life in 15th century Spain involved constant physical labor from dawn until dusk, even for city dwellers. There were no weekends off, no vacations, and certainly no ergonomic considerations. Whether you were a craftsman, a merchant, a laborer, or even a nobleman, the physical demands of daily life were relentless. Hauling water, grinding grain, walking everywhere, performing repetitive tasks with rudimentary tools. Your body was your primary instrument, used until it broke down. You might think you work hard in your modern life, but the physical reality of the Inquisition era was something entirely different, backbreaking work that left even the strongest people permanently hunched and arthritic by their 30s. Imagine spending 14 hours engaged in manual labor, often fueled by a meager diet of bread, gruel, and watered-down wine. No wonder the average lifespan was dismally short, often barely past 30. But physical discomfort is the least of your worries. Your real enemy isn't the grime or the labor. It's the invisible, omnipresent fear that permeates every breath you take, every word you utter, every thought you entertain. You are in a society gripped by a religious fervor so intense, so absolute, that it dictated every facet of existence, and dissent, even perceived dissent, was the gravest of sins, punishable by the loss of everything: your property, your reputation, your freedom, and ultimately, your life. The Spanish Inquisition, fully established and zealously prosecuted under Torquemada, was not merely a judicial body. It was a societal purge, designed to ensure absolute religious uniformity, primarily targeting conversos, Jews who had converted to Christianity, and later Moriscos, Muslims who had converted. Even if you were born and raised Catholic, the air was thick with suspicion, and the slightest misstep could be interpreted as heresy. Your modern understanding of individual rights, due process, or freedom of speech is not just absent here. It's an alien concept that would swiftly lead to your downfall. You open your mouth to express a logical thought, a questioning doubt, or even a casual observation that contradicts local custom, and you've already sealed your fate. Imagine complaining about the quality of the bread, or perhaps questioning a sermon's nuance, or, God forbid, suggesting that the local priest's sermon was a bit tedious. In your world, that's a minor grumble. In this world, such seemingly innocuous remarks could be overheard by a neighbor, a servant, or even a child, and within hours, you could find yourself denounced to the Holy Office. Denunciations were often anonymous, and the accuser's identity was never revealed to the accused. This fostered a climate of paranoia where trust was a luxury few could afford. Your closest friends, your family members, even your spouse, might be tempted or coerced into denouncing you, perhaps to save themselves, to settle an old score, or out of genuine, albeit misguided, religious zeal. You have no idea who might be listening, so every conversation is a tightrope walk over an abyss. Consider the simple act of eating. You're accustomed to a diverse diet, perhaps even enjoying a pork chop or a ham sandwich. But what if, in a moment of absent-mindedness, you prepared a meal in a way that suspiciously resembled a Jewish custom, like meticulously draining the blood from meat, or avoiding pork entirely? Or what if you lit candles on a Friday evening, a tradition among conversos, even if you did it innocently, perhaps out of habit from a past you don't recall but your subconscious does? These seemingly trivial actions, completely innocent in your eyes, could be interpreted as evidence of a secret return to a prior faith, a grave offense in the eyes of the Inquisition. Their spies were everywhere, not just official informers, but ordinary citizens, encouraged to report anything that deviated from the established Catholic norm. You couldn't blend in because you don't know the norms deeply enough. You don't know the exact prayer rhythms, the specific superstitions, the subtle inflections in speech that signal belonging. Your unfamiliarity, your slight awkwardness, your unwitting deviation from a deeply ingrained cultural practice would stick out like a sore thumb. Your mannerisms, your way of thinking, even your casual shrugs would be alien, interpreted as arrogance, or worse, a sign of hidden heresy. The concept of innocent until proven guilty is a modern legal cornerstone. In the Inquisition's world, you were effectively guilty once accused. The burden of proof was on you to prove your innocence, a near impossible task when the charges were vague, the accusers anonymous, and the evidence often based on rumor or forced confessions. Once you were arrested, you would be taken to a secret prison, often an isolated cell with no contact with the outside world. This isolation itself was a form of torture. Days would stretch into weeks, weeks into months, sometimes years, without knowing why you were there, who accused you, or what your fate would be. This psychological torment was designed to break your spirit, to make you desperate for any kind of resolution, even a false confession. During your interrogation, you would be presented with evidence that was often circumstantial, twisted, or fabricated. You might be shown a statement from an unnamed witness claiming you ate meat on a fast day, or that you hummed a non-Christian tune, or that you spoke ill of a saint. Your attempts to explain, to logically dismantle the accusations, would be met with stone faces and relentless repetition of the charges. The interrogators were not interested in truth, as you understand it. They were interested in confession, for confession was seen as an act of repentance, a necessary step for your soul's salvation, even if it meant admitting to something you never did. And if you refused to confess, that's where the processes became more persuasive. While the Inquisition's primary goal was confession and repentance, not necessarily brutal torture for its own sake, the use of mild coercive methods was sanctioned to extract the truth. Imagine being subjected to the strappado, where your hands are tied behind your back, and you are lifted by a rope to the ceiling, then suddenly dropped, stopping just short of the ground, dislocating your shoulders. Or perhaps the water cure, where you are forced to ingest large quantities of water, leading to a sensation of drowning. Your modern body, accustomed to comfort and immediate medical attention, would quickly give out. Even if you were physically strong, the mental anguish, the knowledge that the pain would continue until you confessed, would be unbearable. You would confess, not because you were guilty, but because you wanted the agony to stop. And once you confessed, your ordeal was far from over. A confession, even a false one, meant you were a penitent sinner. Your property would be confiscated, often split between the church and the crown, leaving your family destitute. You would be forced to participate in an auto da fe, a public spectacle where condemned heretics and penitent sinners were paraded before the populace, their crimes declared, their sentences announced. Imagine standing there wearing a San Benito penitential garment, a yellow sackcloth tunic emblazoned with crosses or images of flamesa, public marker of your shame that would follow you for the rest of your life, ensuring social ostracism for you and your descendants. Even if you escaped execution, your life would be irrevocably ruined. Your social standing would be gone, your ability to earn a living severely hampered, and your every move would be watched. A constant reminder that you were once branded by the Holy Office. For a modern person, the idea of having your entire life, and the lives of your family, destroyed based on arbitrary accusations and coerced confessions, is unimaginable. You're used to seeking legal aid, appealing decisions, or relying on evidence. None of that exists here. Your only recourse is to confess, repent, and hope for a lighter sentence, which often meant life imprisonment or forced labor, in addition to the public shaming and financial ruin. Beyond the direct threat of the Inquisition, daily life itself presented insurmountable challenges for a modern individual. Healthcare was rudimentary at best, and often dangerous. Common illnesses that you would dismiss with a trip to the pharmacy could be deadly. A simple cut could lead to a fatal infection. Poor nutrition, unsanitary conditions, and lack of medical knowledge meant that plagues and epidemics were frequent and devastating. Your immune system, accustomed to vaccines and antibiotics, would be overwhelmed by the myriad pathogens that thrived in the 15th century. Childbirth was a perilous endeavor for women, and infant mortality rates were staggeringly high. Even if you avoided the Inquisition, the mundane realities of daily life were a constant battle for survival against disease, hunger, and physical hardship. Furthermore, your social interactions would be fraught with peril. You are used to a society where individual thought and expression are valued. In 15th century Spain, conformity was king. Religious dogma dictated everything, from art to literature to even the smallest social customs. Your casual conversations, your jokes, your opinions on politics or religion of it would be scrutinized, judged against an unspoken set of rules that you don't comprehend. The lack of privacy is another insidious threat. Homes were often crowded, and communal living was common. There were no secure, private spaces where you could truly be yourself, without fear of being overheard or observed. Even in your own home, you would feel the weight of constant potential surveillance. This would lead to a profound sense of isolation, despite being surrounded by people, because genuine trust would be almost impossible to establish. You'd become a master of self-censorship, constantly second-guessing every word, every gesture, every fleeting thought, until your very personality began to calcify under the pressure. The lack of reliable information would also be a major handicap. News traveled slowly, often distorted by rumor and superstition. There were no newspapers, no internet, no objective sources of information. You would be reliant on what you heard in the town square, from travelers or from the pulpit, all filtered through the lens of local prejudice and official propaganda. Making informed decisions, understanding the true state of affairs, or even discerning legitimate threats from unfounded paranoia would be incredibly difficult. Your modern mind, accustomed to rapid information flow and critical analysis, would be starved and disoriented. The sheer boredom and intellectual stagnation would also be a challenge. While life was physically demanding, It offered little in the way of intellectual stimulation or diverse entertainment beyond religious festivals and local gossip. The concept of leisure as we know it didn't exist for most people. Your days would be monotonous, repetitive, and intellectually unfulfilling, a stark contrast to the stimulating, information-rich environment you're used to. This lack of mental engagement, coupled with the constant fear, could lead to a profound sense of despair and apathy. You would quickly lose the mental sharpness and adaptability that you rely on in your modern life. Your ability to reason, to imagine living in a story long, long ago, where your ability to think ahead and make plans might become a bit fuzzy because of how much grown-ups worried and how tired everyone felt from just living each day. Also, the grown-ups' idea of fairness was totally different back then. For the people who were in charge, fairness was about making sure everyone believed the same things and followed the rules of their community, not about making sure everyone had their own freedom or was treated fairly like we think today. The idea of being kind to everyone would have sounded super strange, maybe even a little bit wrong, to the grown-ups in charge. They believed they were helping people's hearts and spirits, even if it meant being really strict with them. You, with your good sense of what's fair and how unfair things can make you feel, would find yourself constantly trying to understand a system that worked in a completely different way. Your quiet thoughts, your gentle suggestions, your attempts to explain things would not only not work, but would probably make the grown-ups think you were being stubborn and needed more gentle reminders. The way they solved problems, if you can even call it that from our perspective, was set up to make people agree with what the grown-ups wanted. Helpers who spoke for people weren't usually allowed at first. Later, if they were, they often couldn't truly stand up for their friend against the things being said. The person in trouble couldn't call friends to say good things about them, but lots of unknown people could tell stories against them. Imagine being in trouble, accused of something big, not knowing who said not nice things about you, not being able to ask questions to the people telling stories, and not being allowed to show proof that you were innocent. It's a little bit scary to think about, a complete opposite of how we do things now. Your modern ideas of a fair hearing, where grown-ups look at clues to decide, just wouldn't make sense in this world. The very idea of saying, "I didn't do it," and expecting a fair grown-up to listen would be a dangerous daydream. The community leaders had the power to say you were out of the club, which meant you couldn't join in any community fun. People would stay away from you, and it was like being a ghost while still alive. This kind of social sadness was often even scarier than getting sick for many people in that very religious time. Omnipresence of religious imagery and rituals would also be overwhelming. Every aspect of daily life, from morning prayers to evening blessings, from the ringing of church bells marking the hours to the public display of religious icons, would reinforce the absolute power of the church. You, with your potentially secular upbringing or diverse spiritual beliefs, would find this pervasive religious atmosphere suffocating. Your attempts to maintain any semblance of your true self, your own thoughts and beliefs, would be a constant, exhausting struggle against a tide of enforced conformity. Even something as simple as medical knowledge would betray you. If you fell ill and instinctively sought a modern solution, perhaps describing symptoms in a way a 15th century physician wouldn't understand, or asking for a remedy that hadn't been discovered yet, you could be seen as practicing witchcraft or having unnatural knowledge. Superstition was rampant, and fear of the supernatural intertwined with religious belief. A fever could be attributed to demonic possession, a strange ailment to a hex. Your attempts to apply rational, scientific thought to medical issues would brand you as an outsider, a potential danger to the community, and someone ripe for inquisitorial scrutiny. Your education would also be a hindrance, rather than a help. Your knowledge of science, history, geography, and philosophy would be completely at odds with the prevailing understanding of the world. Even speaking about a round Earth, or the heliocentric model of the universe, which was still centuries from widespread acceptance, could be seen as heresy. The printing press was still relatively new, and books were scarce and heavily censored. Your extensive knowledge, far from making you superior, would make you dangerous a source of ideas that challenge the established order, an order maintained by the Inquisition. You would have to actively suppress your vast understanding of the world, pretending to be ignorant of things you know to be true, a mentally taxing exercise that would constantly put you at risk of slipping up. The constant threat of being another is perhaps the most significant challenge. Even if you successfully navigated the religious pitfalls, your mere existence as someone who doesn't belong would make you vulnerable. Your accent, your physical appearance, if it differs, your slight variations in custom or dress, all of it, would mark you. In a deeply insular society, strangers were often viewed with suspicion, and the Inquisition thrived on that suspicion. They provided an outlet for societal anxieties, scapegoating those perceived as different or as threats to uniformity. You, by virtue of being from another time, would inherently be that other. You wouldn't survive because the world of the Spanish Inquisition was not built for individuals who valued personal freedom, critical thought, or due process. It was a world built on fear, conformity, and absolute obedience to religious authority. Your modern mindset, your innate need for truth and justice, would be your greatest vulnerability. You would either betray your own principles to survive, becoming a shadow of yourself, or you would bravely, perhaps foolishly, challenge the system and be swiftly consumed by it. The sheer psychological strain of living under constant surveillance, the fear of anonymous denunciation, the knowledge that your fate rested on the arbitrary judgment of zealous men rather than on truth or evidence, would break even the strongest of modern minds. You'd drown in the silence of the cells, crumble under the weight of false accusations, or simply fade away under the relentless pressure to conform. Survival, in this context, meant sacrificing your very essence, something a modern person is ill-equipped to do. The ability to simply blend in, to become invisible, to truly believe in and outwardly practice the all-encompassing dogma without a single flicker of doubt is a skill you do not possess. You might survive a day, perhaps two, on sheer luck or by remaining absolutely silent. But the longer you existed, the more your modern habits, your ingrained thought processes, your casual freedoms would betray you. So, no, you wouldn't survive the Spanish Inquisition. Not because you're weak, but because you are fundamentally unsuited for a world where freedom of thought is heresy and suspicion is law.